And let's get right into our conversation with Premier Wab Kinew, who is in studio for our monthly interview. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me back.
So we have a lot of news to get through. Let's start with the developments, Premier, if we may here. So obviously you're waking up like we all are, hearing that for the first time in our country's history, we've got both railways, that have a work stoppage. A lot of concerns in Manitoba. First, what would you say to producers who are worried about their crops here and, not being able to move their grain and other things?
Well, we've got your back, and we're talking to the federal government about how do we get the trains moving again. I mean, for the folks in the middle of harvest season, heading deeper into harvest season, it's a big concern about getting ag product to market, but it's also going to have an impact on input costs and just the overall uncertainty. When we look at our provincial economy, agriculture is the backbone directly, but also the value-added manufacturing sector that is built on top of the ag industry. And so to see this is really bad for our provincial economy, and it's irresponsible of these two countries to be these two companies rather. It's irresponsible for these two companies to be locking out their employees. The best place to get a deal is at the negotiating table. The union is there. The workers, I think, have some legitimate points to make around safety and around the fact that everybody's going through this cost of living crisis right now. So we need the federal government to bring the situation to an end. And so this morning, waking up to the news, as you say, I'm on the phone with folks at the federal government in Ottawa saying we need action here to keep the economy moving and to get the trains running again.
What kind of action are you in favor of back to work legislation, and if so, how soon?
Well, because it's a lockout, it's on the company, right? So back to work legislation is what happens if there's a strike too often. And because we often hear of, the hammer being brought down on the workers in situations like that, so to speak. In this situation, why wouldn't we expect a strong response to force the companies that are behaving irresponsibly here? And so the federal government has tools at their disposal. I know there's been some conversation around binding arbitration, but I don't know if that's the right fit in this situation because you have a lot of detailed health and safety sort of considerations that bringing in an arbitrator at the 11th hour might not be the best resolution for.
And they've been talking for 9 months already.
They've been talking.
One might question what that would do at this stage.
Right, exactly. So I think the federal government, with the tools that they have, this being a federally regulated part of the economy, they need to step in and just say, it's irresponsible to be trying to stop moving ag goods and energy products and the rest of the sectors of our economy that are depending on this at this time of year.
Just before we leave this topic, you said you were on the phone with Ottawa this morning. Were you on the phone? Who were you reaching out to there, connecting with?
I think I'll have more to say as the situation unfolds. I don't want to sort of...
We'll leave it there.
Yeah, speak about private conversations just yet, but rest assured we are on this and we want to see the trains moving.
I want to go to the terrible story out of MCCRE, the murders and suicide there, the killings of 3 people. RCMP have said the ex-partner of Marlon Glover, CBC's now confirmed this is the man linked to the killings, had a protection order against him. Of course, in February this year, we had 5 other deaths in Carmen. Experts said there it was an example as well of domestic violence. I want you to hear just for a moment here from a guest we had on before 8. This is Sungai Movingi Van Landegem. She's with the Manitoba Association for Women's Shelters. We asked her what more the province might be able to do to help.
It has to be across the board. That means collaborations between the justice system, shelter systems, mental health systems, affordable housing. All of those different areas need to be working together. Working in silos is not going to solve, the challenges and the issues that are coming up.
She was referring there to, the idea of working in silos, also related to, Premier, the fact that there's a lack of shelters, especially in rural places when people need help. It's not where they need it. The coordination piece is an issue, and of course the funding. What more can your government do to help people?
Well, I think there's a lot of good points there. And the details, as we learn more about what happened in MCCRE, is just awful. And in terms of the calls from people such as your guest and others in the community who want to see action, it's very sobering, and it really does focus on the need for us to do more. So we are investing more in supports for shelters on the operating side. We also have the resources coming both this year going into future years to stand up more 24/7 safe spaces, including in rural Manitoba. So this would be a place where somebody can go for that immediate safe space in a time of crisis. And so we're taking action there. But I think the point around moving out of silos is really key. And to that, Minister Nahanni Fontaine, who was actually speaking to frontline shelter workers yesterday, and Minister Bernadette Smith, who's in charge of housing addictions and homelessness, who was in MCCRE yesterday, they are co-chairing an MMIWG2S Plus and Gender-Based Violence Committee of Cabinet. And the idea there is, instead of having this program running out of the Families Department and that program running out of the Housing Addictions and Homelessness Department and this other thing in the Justice Department, all those ministries are at the table. And they're working together to respond to this ask of how do we implement a solution that is going to ensure that somebody who needs help can get it.
You talked about more 24-hour safe spaces just now. You said especially rural Manitoba is something you're working on. Can you give us any more detail about the number or where you're looking at targeting? Or
Yeah, and just to set a realistic expectation, this is probably going to be a multi-year process in terms of identifying the local organizations to run and then actually standing up the facilities and stuff like that. But Winnipeg is part of the list, and when we get to the part of the conversation on rural, we're looking at Brandon and Thompson as the first two outside of the city of Winnipeg. And then I think Dauphin, actually, which is not too far from MCCRE, is probably the next location after that.
Before we leave this topic, I want to ask about protection orders. And we have done so many interviews over the years, and they always come as a result after someone has violated a protection order. And then we look at why they're not effective. Why don't they work? How could they work? How could they be strengthened? And this morning, my ears were ringing, thinking we are still in this issue. What are your thoughts on how we make sure there are consequences for violating a protection order, or that they're more effective because we have enough enforcement, which is what advocates are telling us, that that's one of the problems, that there's an issue with them being enforced?
Well, I think some of the investments that we've made into the justice system around enforcement are designed to produce better standards around accountability here. And so we are making those investments in the justice system. In terms of future steps after putting additional resources, which we're doing right now, I think one of the conversations we're having in government is this topic of coercive control. And I think that based on what we've been hearing on the reporting of this instance, coercive control are those terrible actions which also unfortunately tend to predict worse situations when it comes to intimate partner violence. So this could be taking the cell phone away, or taking the debit card away, or taking other steps to try and cut a person off from economic resources, cut a person off from family. So I can tell you that our government, although we're not at a position to make a formal announcement here, we're looking closely at coercive control and how can we use the legal framework here in Manitoba to step in at that level and hopefully not only address that very challenging situation for people who are living through it, but also maybe head off some of these worse outcomes that unfortunately we've been visited with too often in Manitoba.
The details on MCCRE continue to come in, including right now. Our news department understands, and CBC has now looked at court documents that show that the charges against Marlon Glover, the man involved in this case, for violating his protection order, were stayed. Is that something that you will seek to try to find out why, to dig further into this case? How concerning is that for you as Premier of this province, in a province where we have one of the highest rates of domestic violence, and we have, people are using the word epidemic? Yeah,
well, we will. When we get into the office after the interview, we'll follow up on that and see what the situation was first and foremost, and then to the point of us having the conversation here today in front of your listeners, see what we can do to address this situation. And the second point of what you say there around this being an epidemic, that is something that we have been having a conversation about with my colleagues, such as the ones that I mentioned, Ministers Smith and Fontaine, but also the Minister of Health and others in our government. And so I think also one of the things that we're doing now is asking Dr. Rusin for his professional public health opinion on this being declared an epidemic. And I think we want to take action beyond the steps that we're already taking. We're going to learn from this terrible tragedy and implement further changes. But I think putting the public health lens on this, asking Dr. Rusin for advice in terms of how do we respond both in the justice system and in the supports around prevention and the supports for shelters. But
and
also,
if it were labeled that way, would it change the responses or would it change things, which is very interesting?
It's an interesting thing that I think we need expertise on, but I think one of the things that we would all recognize is that I'm using this in the layperson's meaning of the term, this seems to be contagious. Meaning this is a learned behavior, this is something that spreads through the society, and are there public health experts who can help us with how do we stop that? How do we interrupt that? How do we prevent it?
8:23, Premier Wab Kinew with us live in studio for our monthly interview as we move through the news of the day. Before I ask you about the an announcement that is coming today, I understand, on free birth control, which I will ask about in a moment, can I ask you just briefly to weigh in on something else that's in the news? We all drive, bike, walk, or roll around the city. There's a group today that's going to have a rally. They want the Idaho Stop to be put into the Traffic Act. That means basically that cyclists will be able to use a stop sign as a yield. Do you have thoughts on that? Whether you'll look at the Traffic Act to, consider that?
Well, I want to disclose two things right off the top. Like one, I just learned about the Idaho Stop. I had no idea what this was until just a short time ago. And then second of all, I ride my bike in the summertime, probably 50 to 70 kilometers a week. So I am somebody who uses a bike around the city, mainly for recreation purposes. I'm not using it to commute, so it's maybe a bit different than some of these folks who are weighing in. But those things out of the way, I have a tough time seeing how letting cyclists go through stop signs is going to advance safety in our communities. And I do worry about the impact on pedestrians, other cyclists, vehicles. I just think that we have stop signs there for a reason, and maybe it's because I'm just learning what an Idaho Stop is, but I have a tough time seeing how this would help make things safer out there.
Birth control, October 1st, I believe, is the date your government's going to put through free birth control. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, later this morning, actually, I think at the top of the hour, actually, the Minister of Health, Zoma Seguera, the Minister of Families, Nahani Fontaine, as well as others from our team and the health sector, are going to announce that birth control is going to become free for everyone in Manitoba who needs it on October 1st. So again, the way that this would work, birth control will be covered by the provincial government, and you access it the same way that you would now, meaning like you go to a primary care provider, if that's your family doctor or a nurse practitioner at the access clinic or what have you. You get the script, you go to the pharmacy, it's going to be covered starting October 1st. And I think this is a big step, something that, many women across the province have been talking about, not just as an important healthcare thing, but also a bit of an affordability measure during this cost of living moment. And so this is an announcement that our team's really proud of.
8:26, for our final section of questions, I want to revisit, you already had a conversation with CBC and Bartlett Key Visible Plan 2050.
Right.
But I have additional questions about this. I mean, today on cbc.ca/Manitoba, people will read that some developers say they were quite surprised that this was going to change, that some municipalities will be able to opt out, as you said. I know during your conversation with Bartley about this, you said you were restoring democracy and choice to the people by removing a mandate to say you have to be part of this regional planning process.
Yeah.
I know you've also said this was a Pallister-Stephenson plan, but then yet you're not scrapping it all together. So I'm wondering, if you believe this should be a democratic process, why not just scrap it all together? Why are you even keeping part of it then?
Well, I think that we're making it voluntary so that if there are municipal leaders out there who want to continue to participate in it, that legwork that's already been done can continue to move forward. But for those who have objected, and you look at the city of Selkirk, who's been very vocal about this going back years now, right to the start, and maybe other municipalities south or to the west of the city that have been weighing in more recently, they're clearly saying that this is not the right fit for them as elected democratic leaders, but also not the right fit for their citizens and ratepayers. And so we want to restore that freedom. We want to restore this voluntary nature through the Freedom Bill that we're going to be bringing forward this fall. I think that the best path forward here is if folks want to advocate and push for regional planning in the Winnipeg region, then I recognize the announcement we're making is creating a bit more work for you.
Feels like a bigger mess. It feels like more red tape, more rezoning.
Actually, it's less red tape because we're removing an unelected board from being able to mandate powers onto local democratic officials. But what I'm saying saying
take
is
that point. I remember that criticism, but I have to say, East St. Paul and Winnipeg, I mean, you've been out to that part. They blur together so much now that, I mean, now it's hard to tell where Winnipeg ends and where East St. Paul begins, just as an example. So all of a sudden, if you have a zoning industrial decision that's on one side, people that literally live right next to there now have no say. So that's not democratic either. So this is...
actually, no, you have more say under our plan. If there are merits to regional planning, then people should be able to go out and make the case and win this argument on a voluntary nature. The idea of using the heavy hand of the provincial government to quash out dissent is the thing that I think Pallister was bringing forward and continued under Heather Stephenson, and that we want to stop. At the end of the day, you have the freedom to choose where you want to live. You have the freedom to choose who you want to vote for. And this freedom bill that we're bringing in is going to restore those rights and just ensure that, there are a lot of strong arguments for a regional approach in a lot of areas, but we're going to say that making the case in public and winning support by a voluntary choice that people can make is the way that you earn support for that. We're not going to rely on the province to mandate people to participate.
On the revenue side of things, though, from the Winnipeg-only perspective, then what do you say to someone that looks at a bedroom community where half the adults or more, of those people might work in Winnipeg? They're using their roads. They use subsidized transit. Maybe they use the parks for recreation facility. They're not paying taxes here. So what do you say to that? That there's a strong case to be made that we should have just a greater Winnipeg region. We've grown to a point now where we should rethink this.
Well, that's going much further than actually any of this conversation talks about. But what I would say is that I'm the leader of the province, not just the city of Winnipeg. And I recognize that there's really strong opportunity here inside the perimeter, but when you look at the growth of Niverville and all the excitement happening there, you look at the really progressive environmental and social and entrepreneurial steps that are happening in Selkirk, there's great things happening in the entire region, and we just want to be able to recognize that local democratic choice, the local decision making and self-determining authority of those regions. And we're saying that the best way for us to move forward as one province is if everybody has that freedom to choose when to participate, when to go their own way. And that sort of maybe, friendly competition at some moments and cooperation at other moments kind of dynamic is how you actually spark that engine of growth that is going to take our province to the next level in the future.
I know we've crept into the news, Premier, but it's been a very busy morning. Thank you for addressing all the topics.
Thank you so much.